Let's go.
I think what Cade's best attribute is his leadership and understanding of the total offensive scheme, as well as what the defense is presenting you, to get everybody lined up and in the right positions. That's how you scheme yourself to an advantage pre-snap.
Hey there. Welcome in on this Michigan Football Friday. That was former Michigan tight end Jake Butt, who joined us, 7 months ago, leading up to the Rose Bowl, the Orange Bowl, talking about the quarterback situation. And we're going to be talking about Jake Butt today. Trevor McCue joins us, and he did a story on Mr. Butt, and we'll be talking about him today. What's going on, Trevor?
Not much, Dennis. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. It's hot, but if enthusiasm and yelling could score you some points, for Michigan football, they would be off and they would be doing a good job, because I am enthusiastic about the upcoming season. I've just been waiting. August gets here. In some ways, August is the toughest month, because you've said, you've spilled your guts on everything. You've analyzed everything that comes out, and then now we're just waiting for kickoff. But we'll reanalyze it this month, just to make sure we haven't missed anything.
Yeah, I think the only thing that's missing is the sound of pads hitting. It was nice to see practice going, and you're right, we've been analyzing every inch of it now. So now with camp starting, there's a little bit more substance there, but yeah, I can feel it. It's getting here close, and I'm ready.
I can too. Antoine is excited, ready to go. I'm glad this is a different start time than normally on a weekday. Well, I mentioned Jake Butt, and Trevor did do a story. It is on Maize and Blue Review right now. You've probably already read it out there. First thing I did this morning, 7, 8 o'clock, and there it was, right up top. So we'll talk about Trevor and Jake in that particular story. We will also, and we will ask anybody that's watching out there, put your picks for the player to click for the Michigan football team coming up this year. Give us one on offense, give us one on defense. Those are the parameters that you can go with, and we'll put your picks to click up on the screen. Trevor, I've asked him to come up with a pair of Wolverines. I have done the same. Trevor, we'll start talking about the fall roster. The spring roster came out, and then you quickly grabbed the spring roster and you grabbed the fall roster, and you started comparing them, and you did a story on it, and a number of things jumped out to you, didn't it?
Yeah, so I think we'll go down the list you've made here. The first one, there's still kind of a question on it. So we noticed that Sainristil was specifically identified as wide receiver and defensive back. We've been hearing all offseason and since the spring experiment that he was potentially going to be a three-way player for them. Mullings was listed just as a linebacker. So along with some other linebackers moving to edge, we thought, okay, maybe he's not going to be a running back anymore. However, the picture we saw coming out of camp is him in a blue jersey working out with the offense. So I've heard he's still getting some work at running back, so we'll have to keep an eye on that. But yeah, the multiple positions there are still a thing.
Let's talk about these guys individually. Now Mullings, we did see him in the spring. He had one nice run. He was reaching out to the goal line, and he lost the ball security there. That doesn't mean you're done. With the running back experiment. Do you think this says more about the depth and how good Michigan feels at running back, or is it just tell you that he's best served as linebacker? If we were to guess about Khalil Mullings.
Yeah. So my first gut reaction was, this tells me if they're moving him to linebacker, but also moving two linebackers out. So we saw, Welshoff is now at edge, moving from the outside as well too. We saw, edge guys, but Tyler McLaurin and the Mekhi Pollard were linebackers coming into the class and now edge players. So I thought, okay, they feel good about linebacker. Mullings is somebody I thought would be a really good middle linebacker. The moving him to running back was just about his potential there. But yeah, confidence in the running back room too. Dunlap looked good in that spring game. You have CJ Stokes coming in. Somebody people forget about is Leon Franklin, a guy that can handle a few carries. And then also, AJ Henning might be looking at 5 carries a game now from the backfield. You also start to look at, and we'll get into this with some of the weight loss and gain. Quorum's up to 210 pounds. Donovan Edwards is 6'1", 204. These guys might be able to do some of the heavy lifting more than we're anticipating. So all of the moves that I saw, and specifically the Mullings one, I only saw that as positives.
Yeah. I was when I saw the Quorum, you mentioned him, how he gained 10 pounds, and I think it says it on there that he's up to 210. So I was looking at the NFL backs and seeing what kind of weight, like he was compared to J.K. Dobbins, coming in as a freshman, talking about Blake Corum. And yeah, you look at most of those guys, they want to be above 210. The 200 is a little light. I remember last year at this time, there was some kind of photo, probably an Instagram photo of Blake Corum, and he looked like the Hulk. I couldn't believe it. He's just like a monster. And, that's not a guy, this is good weight that I'm thinking that Corum, this is not like I've gained 10 pounds here since this and fall roster too, but it's not a good 10 pounds. This is a good 10 for Blake.
Yeah, I might have found the weight that Trevor Keegan lost. So, if you look at Blake Corum, that's all good weight, man. The guy he's jacked, and honestly, he has been since he got here. So the idea he was able to add 10 more pounds. I mean, you heard the thunder and lightning combo with him and Haskins last year, and I think pegging him as lightning might have changed people's perspective about him a little bit. He reminds me a lot of his running back coach, Mike Hart. He's got a low center of gravity. He makes really good quick cuts, but he's stronger than people think, man. So yeah, I'm excited about him back there as well. And Edwards too. I mean, there was a practice photo that came out with Edwards where he's really lean and muscular. He looks super strong in camp too. I mean, the whole team, honestly, the amount of weight gain we saw in certain spots, and then, like the guards stuck out to me. Both Keegan and Zinter lost weight. So I think that's an indication that, those guys are going to be getting out in space a little bit more maybe than last year, whereas the other linemen on the outside gained weight, right? And then on the other side of the ball, the defensive tackle, I mean, what a difference from a few years ago.
Yeah, they've got some real space eaters, especially you look at Monzi right there. The sky's the limit for him, being up 11 points. This question gets asked a lot. It's from Antoine. He wants to know who's been showing some good work at camp. He knows his favorite insider has got some juicy news. Now, you may have some juicy news. I don't know, Trevor, but when they just started on Wednesday, they just have their helmets on. And then I think they're getting ready to put the shoulder pads on, maybe today, maybe tomorrow. And then next week, they'll actually put the entire gear on, and they may start hitting. Guys running around at this point. Is there anything that, even if you were calling up the guys that are watching practice and you say, hey, who looks good? They're like, come on now, give us a couple of games. What are they saying to you?
Yeah, I hate to let my boy Antoine down on this one, but yeah, they're warming up. I mean, yeah, they're wearing the uniforms, but this is, warming up in shorts kind of stuff. No pads on yet. So, we haven't gotten much out except for Josh was able to kind of get what the schedule looks like and what the teams are going to be doing. I have heard, I guess this is the one little thing I can give you with Cade and JJ, there was some talk of him getting all the ones that they've been kind of even so far. But again, they're just tossing the ball around. I don't think that means anything. So next week when the pads get on, I think that's when, they start breaking up into the ones and twos a little bit more. I think that's where we can start to draw some conclusions. So best thing I can say that we've heard coming into camp so far is everybody's healthy. I mean, there's really no red flags that we've had kind of in the past of lingering injuries coming into camp. A lot of these guys that missed in the spring, or maybe we're dealing with some things. Ronnie still has the brace on his knee, but I mean, he's doing drills. He's running routes. He should be full contact by the time they turn there. So nothing great or new, but nothing bad either. So we'll take it for the first week.
Yeah, I saw that with Ronnie Bell. I guess precautionary.
Yeah,
You wear that brace, and you're right about the health. Like sometimes you think, like I just said, like the news will be trickling to next week. Sometimes when you pretty much know what you have offensively, I don't know. I think no news is good news when it comes to offense. I don't want to be
agreed.
hearing about anybody getting rolled up on or this guy going down. Defensively, you can look at the starts from last year, and I know that you've done a pretty good job putting up a depth chart, and I agree with it, especially when you have to start looking at the different moves on the defensive line and outside linebacker. That can get kind of difficult, but you have a pretty good framework on what it's going to be. But there's a lot of different guys that like it wouldn't be a surprise. I'll ask you, like you've done it, but I don't know. You have a depth chart out, but how surprised would you be if there were maybe 2, 3, maybe even 4 guys that made a move, whether it was into the 2 deep or all the way, the
Yeah,
maybe into the starting lineup?
not at all. I think there's a few guys that are going to be staples. We know the names, and I think you're right too. If I were to make a correlation between previous starts and who's going to lead the way this year, the names, right? It's Mozzie Smith, it's DJ Turner, Junior Colson. Those guys are going to be the staples. I think Mike Morris probably has a good hold on his spot. But a lot of these positions, the edge role with Ojabo that we've talked about so much, I'm big on Taylor Upshaw. I'm going to hype him until I can't anymore. But behind him, McGregor, TJ Guy, now with Welshoff moving into that position as well. There's going to be 4 or 5 guys in some spots that are making plays. At linebacker, Colson, Hill Green. I think Hill Green's probably not getting enough attention. I think he's going to have a better year than most people think as well. But, same thing there. If Mullings is sliding back over, you've got your freshman, Jimmy Rolder's 228 pounds. And then, there's just guys all over this place. Corner, too. McBurrows was injured, so he didn't get a lot of run, but Sainristil's over there now. Will Johnson. They're just my head's spinning trying to think of all the names.
It feels like as we talk about the defense and you go through all that there's an opportunity. You just look at all the freshmen, even the guys on the defensive line, even the guys inside from Mason Graham to Kenneth Grant.
Yeah.
Derek Moore could get some snaps on the outside. You mentioned Rolder. There's a couple other linebackers there. And then there's a host of corners and safeties that you would imagine that the 2 or 3 of them, Will Johnson being one of those, these guys, they could have a big freshman impact on defense.
For sure. And, we've talked about the schedule. I think similar to 2016 where a lot of guys were getting a lot of snaps, that'd be the hope, right? That they get a big enough lead that these guys can get some good play early in the season so later they can make an impact as well. It's tough because you project for a lot of freshmen and then you remember they're freshmen, right? There's things that they need to overcome. But, man, this class is crazy, just physically and in terms of how far ahead of schedule they are. In the secondary, we've talked about Johnson and Sav, and then obviously, the 3 defensive linemen that you've mentioned, Derek Moore, Mason Graham, and Kenneth Grant. I think they're going to have an impact as a freshman, and I don't know what we're going to think about these 3 guys, in their year next year, in their junior year, like the potential. Moore's 280 pounds. Graham's 317, I think he was, and Kenneth Grant's running sub-5s at 356 pounds. Like, they're going to find the field. They're just too physical, too good. If they can help the team win, they're going to see the field.
That's Trevor McCue, the staff writer for Maize and Blue Review, joining us here on this Friday. Different start time for Michigan football today. You heard Jake Butt at the beginning of the show, and I already mentioned that Trevor had a story with Jake that he put out today on Maize and Blue Review, and you can go there and read it. And I'll tell you, you better carve out. Like, I thought maybe I was going to have just 5 minutes, and then I was like, wait a second. I started going on. I'm like, this is a little bit longer than I don't know how many words, 10,000 words or whatever you put down on Jake Butt. But this isn't a story. This is a little bit of a mini book on Jake Butt. Tell me about it a little bit as we take a look at some of the pictures and quotes from that Jake gave you.
Yeah, so I don't know, it was an experience. Him and I have been texting and communicating for a couple weeks. The bulk of the article came from an hour phone conversation that we had. I found myself unable to cut anything from the story that I had written. When I really sat down and started writing it, I was up till 4 a.m. It just kind of kept pouring out of me. I left out a bunch of stuff. That's the sad thing, even as long as it is. But he is just, I mean, we all know the story of the injury, but hearing it from him and what he has to say, and just, I told him at one point, I said, I hope I'm not going to offend you here, but like, I'm blown away by your perspective on this. He goes in and out of just being the chillest, most down to earth guy. Like, I think he forgets that, like, you're this all-American tight end, you know, and you feel like you're just talking to one of your buddies. And then he'll say just the most profound, you know, statement. And, you know, he's been through, like he said, his own personal hell, and he's come out of it. And he just has a lot of great insight and vision. And I think a lot of people, whatever you face day to day, there's a lot of things Jake said in there that I think you can pull from. He's just a really good dude, great head on his shoulders. He loves this program. He loves Michigan. He loves Ann Arbor. It's just who he is. And I was so lucky to get to talk to him and still talk to him. I mean, he's the coolest dude.
Tell me something going in that you didn't know about Jake Butt, but when you followed the story and after everything and listening to the tape and writing the story that you didn't know about him.
Yeah. So the first thing, when I approached him about the story, I kind of hedged and was like, hey, we don't need to, you know, get into the injuries too much. He'd been so candid through the years. I know he's been asked these questions all the time. So I was like, you know, we can talk about everything else. We don't have to get into that too much. And he immediately said to me, that is my story. So we can't tell my story if we don't get into that. I was like, all right, dude. So as soon as we got into the Orange Bowl, he started telling me about how sick he was before the game, that on the flight to Miami, he was feeling ill. And then at one point in Miami, he was in the hospital. He had a fever of over 103 2 days before the game. And he got back to the hotel room, and Jed Fish came to check in on him. And, you know, people had already been asking him at this point about sitting out. And he said he was almost offended because he's like, do you guys not know me? Like, there's no way I'm not playing in this game. And he said Fish came into his room, and he didn't want to tell him not to play, or that, you know, maybe this was a sign. He didn't want to say any of those things, but he could see it on his eyes and in his face. And he just responded immediately, Jed, you know, I'm playing in the game. So, you know, he said he still was probably not feeling great, you know, in the game. But to think that, you know, if he had continued to be ill for a little bit longer, maybe he's held out of the game for a different reason. You know, it's just, and his whole story had weird little, you know, flukes and moments like that seem insignificant at the time. And then now it's like, man, what could have been? But yeah, I had no idea that he was sick before the game.
Well, it's all a backdrop of the conversation this summer, and it goes back. I can remember, and this was a championship game, a running back from Miami, Willis McGahee against Ohio State. He got his knee blown up in the championship game, you know, and he's that close to going pro. He ended up being a good and having a good professional career anyways. But there's a lot of guys you get in there, you see him. There was the quarterback this year from Ole Miss that got hurt. Yeah. So you're like, man. And then the talk now that with name, image, and likeness, and they get to these bowls, and you know I saw a poll recently, just this week, about players, and they said, what's it going to be? You know, what's it going to take for more players to commit to playing in the bowl games? And 80% of them said name, image, and likeness. It's going to be, you know, getting paid to play in those bowls. And, you know, Jake's name will get brought up all the time. You went to what, you know, and if you ask me, you know, my daughter's 16 now, but when Jake was playing at Michigan, you know, I don't know, so 8 years ago, she was like 8 years old, and, you know, she was watching the game one time with me, and in the back, she's like, what's that guy's name? And I said, that's Jake. She's like, Jake Butt, you know, and she thought, you know, and an 8-year-old girl, she thought it was funny. And then I used to tell her, like, you know, if you married Jake, your name would be Faith Butt. And she thought that was funny. And then she's like, he's too old for me. And I'm like, well, what if he had a little brother? You know, you could end up, you know, with that name. So it was one of her favorite players all the way through, you know, but of course that name, it's pretty catchy, you know, and it's one to remember.
Yeah, and we talked about that in the story as well, because it was something that I did kind of know about him, was just the way that he owned his name. His Twitter handle is Jay Booty, and his whole family would come to the games. I talked to him a couple times with, Papa Butt, Mama Butt, Sister Butt, so their family completely embraced it. One thing he did, bring up in the story along the lines of NIL and his support for it was, he said, had NIL existed when he played, that would have been the greatest earning potential in his career. Not when he was in the NFL, but those 2 great years he had at Michigan as a junior and senior, that would have been his greatest earning potential. And yeah, with the name, he probably would have had some interesting deals he could have gotten into and things he would have been willing to do along the lines of that. He mentioned another story too, similar like with your daughter. He said he had the parents of a small kid that added him online that just thought his name was funny, and he communicated with the kid, and yeah, he completely embraced it. The other thing I want to touch on, because I didn't really get into this too much in the article as well, that you kind of mentioned, because I asked him specifically, anytime bowl season comes around, your name comes up, right? And when somebody makes a decision one way or another, your name comes up. How do you feel about that? And he told me, I feel obligated to tell my story. I'm glad my name comes up because I'm one side of the decision. So, when Matt Corral made his decision, Jake gives him cover in a way, so that it's okay to make that decision if that's where you want to go. He also brought up his family situation was very different than someone else, right? There's folks that money could change, going to the NFL and skipping the bowl game, that money could change their family's lives. They might have a small kid at home to take care of. And I think that was the thing he said, is trying to put a blanket on everybody and making these assumptions about their character when they make that decision is just not fair, because everybody has different things that drive him. So him playing didn't mean he's a better teammate than somebody that sat out, and somebody that sat out isn't smarter financially than Jake is, right? Jake did everything financially he needed to do. He just wanted to play the game because that's what got him there, was that competitive edge and playing and being with his buddies. Like that's he wanted to play. It's that simple.
Yeah, well, that time of year, it is one of those things that will bring the fans out and bring the opinions out. It's just like guys when they decide if they are, let's say, a running back. I think of Travis Etienne, who ended up getting hurt for the Jags last year. He could have gone the year before and probably been a 1st or 2nd round pick right in there. I mean, he's great college running back, and he decided to go back from Clemson. The amount of people that telling him he's stupid and that he's given up all of this money, and it's not just the opinions. Like, yeah, I understand, you can have that opinion, like, hey, I would never do that. It's costing you money, or you can lay out the actual money that he could miss, but the actual fervor that people have, towards the players, like it's kind of the same thing. Like, I'm never playing a ball game when you're guaranteed the money. You got to be. Different guys are wired a different way. Not everybody, like you say this, most people are consumed with trying to get as much money as they possibly can, but not every single person is wired up to make every decision about money. And it blows that I don't even know, 95% away. They just can't believe that somebody would be making a decision that wouldn't, have their family and their life, as the first and foremost of their decision, but they do it anyways.
Yeah, I mean, talking with Jake, whenever he talked about wanting to play and loving the game, and the different things you hear from football players, he meant it, right? Like talking about that competitive edge and the grind and the love of the game, he means it when he says it. And the money thing, it wasn't even just that singular decision. He told me even when he retired, when he made the decision to retire because he just didn't have it in him to get up every day anymore, that last camp with the Bears, he said he would almost be upset because he felt like people were judging him when they said, hey, so what are you going to do next? And like the question was based around like, I can't believe you gave up $1 million and you don't know what you're going to do next. Like he felt so judged by that. Like everything was framed around this money. And I thought something insightful he said to me, one of the many things was the time he had it the best money-wise, had the nice car, had the nice apartment, had the most in the account, that was the time he was the most miserable, right? So money doesn't buy you happiness, right? All of those things. But like for him, he wasn't happy, right? The injuries were obviously a huge part of it, but he retires and he goes back home to his family and then feels this, bridge back to Ann Arbor. Ann Arbor is home for him now. He comes back to Ann Arbor, and the 2021 season for him, these former players, you realize their bond. He was on the team. Those wins, that program, what they did last year, beating Ohio State, he said brought him more joy. It was unparalleled, the amount of joy he had. This is a guy that hasn't been on the field for Michigan in 5 years. And just seeing his university, his football program beat Ohio State, get to the Big Ten championship, meant the entire world to him. It brought joy of football back into his life, and eventually started the dominoes that now have him working for the Big Ten Network and being around football again. And guess what? Back on the path to being successful, despite the fact other people told him he was stupid for quitting football. So,
yeah, and I watched do the broadcast of the Michigan spring game. I think that was his first up the bat, as a color analyst, and that's a good starting spot, being able to do a Michigan game. But from what I saw from him, he'll be great at it. He knows, he'll work at it, and some people you can just tell, the first time around, he knows how to give you enough of the technical jargon where you're like, okay, he is telling me something, but enough where he's also telling just the average person there that's watching the game something. So it's going to work for him. I can see that.
Yeah, he's a good person. He's sincere. He has an awesome personality, and he works his tail off. So whatever's in front of him, he's going to do good at. But yeah, same thing I told him. I'm like, I'm not trying to kiss your butt, man, because I've been watching a ton of the spring game highlights for an article I was working on. So I listened to him a ton doing the broadcast for a couple of days. I'm like, you did a great job, man. And he told me most nervous he'd been was sitting in the booth because you can't hide. He said, you're by yourself versus being on the field and there's, 10 other guys or whatever. So it's funny to hear this guy that, was recruited by the best programs in the country, that played at Michigan, that is arguably the best tight end in Michigan history, went to the NFL. And the scariest moment he had was sitting in the booth at a Michigan spring game. So, but yeah, I'm proud of him. I'm excited for him. Big fan. I'm going to be rooting for him all the way.
You weren't trying to kiss his what?
Oh, his butt. Yeah.
Oh, okay. His butt.
Obvious
story
on there.
Yeah, the story on the Maize and Blue review. If you're just joining us, we are now going to pick a player, one on each side of the ball, that we think is going to click for the Wolverines. And we would like you to put a player or one on each side of the ball that you think will click this year for the Maize and Blue. You can you do that. We'll put the message up on the screen. And for that, we'll tell you how you can read that story that Trevor did with Jake Butt coming up momentarily as well. But I'm going to put mine up there first, and I'm going to go first. Picks to click for the Michigan football team in 2022. I guess I do have one of them covered. I like that with our pictures over there. But the offensive player that I'm going with is number 3, A.J. Henning. He is a wide receiver, but he is going to be used at running back. And there's something about Deebo Samuel. If you watch the playoffs this year, he almost had 10 carries a game. And they put his new contract, they gave him incentives for running the ball and being able to do that. And just watching some of the 49ers games and just listening to the analyst there, you could see that it's screwed with the linebackers and the coverages when you put AJ or when you put Deebo Samuel in the backfield. There's communication issues, and I know that teams will be working on that, but Michigan, it's an obvious thing to do. And then, Trevor, when you have players of the ilk of Donovan Edwards, who has made a name for himself, he'll probably make a name for himself as a running back, running the ball straight up the middle. But it was the Maryland game last year where he had the 10 catches and 170 yards. And you're like, man, are you sure this guy's a running back? He had 10 catches, set a Michigan record. Flaring him out and then motioning A.J. Deebo Henning into the backfield, I would think would confuse defenses. You might not do it against Colorado State. You might not do it against Hawaii. You might not do it against UConn or Maryland. but you might do it against Iowa. And, the Hawkeyes could practice for it all you want, but I would imagine, the Hawkeyes will be on guard for any time Donovan Edwards moves around after he threw that pass on him. But that seems like you don't even know if it's trickery. It's just it's something to use the whole field and make the personnel but confuse them a little bit. I have A.J. Henning as a pick to click out of the backfield. If he hangs on to the ball a little bit more, I could see him making a move as a wide receiver as well. And he's a really good returner. And it was just the first game last year when he took that 74-yarder around the left side and went up the and went up the near side for a touchdown. A.J. Henning, my pick on the offense. What do you think?
Ditto. I can just throw all my notes away. A.J. Henning's my guy too.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah, and we've talked about Donovan Edwards. I think people know the situation there. The two of those guys together, what a unique situation. Because like you just said, what if I switch Donovan and Henning? Like, does that change for the defense or does it not? Like having that versatile of guys. I think Edwards could lead the team in receiving this year, even as a running back, right? And still rush for 1,000 yards. But Henning...
lead him as in receiving. I like it.
Yeah. But yeah, Henning, I think people forget Henning was one of the top receiver recruits in his class. The guy's a really good receiver. Again, it's not normal for freshmen or sophomores even to come in and have these breakout seasons. It's okay for a guy to have to develop and add a little weight and learn some routes and things like that. Going into junior year, I think Henning's going to be a star this year because of, you bring in the punt return element, right? He's going to be real dynamic there. Not just doing the end arounds, which, hey, he found the end zone against Ohio State running an end around, right? Not just doing that stuff, but like literally lining them up in the backfield. Or, I think what you could see, the pistol formation that was used in Baltimore, imagine JJ or Cade, Donovan and Corum and Henning, all in the backfield. What in the world are you going to do in that situation, right? So, yeah, Henning's crazy speed. I think he's going to have a much better year as a receiver, especially if you see Ronnie Bell lining up on the outside more. Could have Henning in the slot and get more action there, too. But, yeah, Henning's my guy as well.
We got the hype train. I think we are all aboard. I'm going to speak for you since you named your pick to click as A.J. Henning, and so did I. That officially makes him and you and I being on the A.J. Henning hype train. Meanwhile, Christopher has put Donovan Edwards as his pick to click. I saw Joel Klatt say that he had Donovan Edwards as his dark horse Big Ten Offensive Player of the Year. That's hype, Trevor.
And I agree completely. So Klatt's a big fan of Edwards because you've seen him play in quite a few games. And that one-handed grab against Ohio State, he was done after that. Like he loves Donovan Edwards. So, I mean, Donovan Edwards would be my pick too. At this point, we've talked about as a guy really a sleeper or whatever when he's been hyped all offseason. I think people know what Edwards is going to be, and that is potentially the best player on this football team.
Christopher, the hype side, we haven't given our picks to click on the defensive side, but Christopher saying a defensive rush end, and he says the tall Mike. Is he talking about Mike Morris? Because Mike Morris is kind of tall.
I would assume so, yeah.
Yeah, Mike Morris, a pick to click. Jim Harbaugh was going into spring when he had his news conference before the spring. He was talking about the team could be scary good, and he kind of put it in relation to the defense. And then when he was asked the question about who was going to replace Ajabo and Hutchinson, he talked about the guys being scary good. The first name that he said is Mike Morris. And he said Mike Morris could be the next Hutchinson or Ajabo. And then he went down the line. Those things usually with head coaches are not done by accident. And so I think you could have Morris there. How about Bale has some selections here. A pick to click, Antrell Anthony, and on defense, Will Johnson. What do you think of the selections there of Bale?
Yeah, I like Antrell Anthony a lot. In my projections, I've had him slotted above Roman Wilson. Those two are going to be the two that kind of fight for that Z wide receiver position. Wilson ended the year great, though. He was the leading receiver for Michigan towards the end of the season. So, but Anthony seems to have, everything you're looking for, being able to high point a ball, Route running, he's got crisper, some, decent speed, not a crazy burner, but some decent speed. There's just so many wide receivers. It's hard to say like this guy's going to be the guy. But yeah, I do think Anthony is going to take a huge step. And then, yeah,
he looked pretty good running that 93-yarder up at Spartan Stadium. He looked pretty close. He looks like, if you're talking about the look test, yep. Anthony looks like a professional. Like, he's a prototype, everything that you're looking for there. Yeah. And I don't know about the speed, but he did look, and Will Johnson, like it's just, it seems just like add playing time and, this guy's going to be great. What I didn't notice until this week when I was hyping some players up and making some predictions is that I remember that this other defensive back that Michigan was going after that I think ultimately went to USC, and he was always rated higher than Will Johnson. And then I was just looking at Rivals' list for this upcoming year for the freshmen, and Will Johnson's the number 5 player overall by Rivals. I mean, he shot up like 28 spots. I was shocked when I saw that. Like, he should be, he's the highest rated freshman recruit in the Big Ten, and he's the 5th highest in the country. And a couple of those guys that were in front of him, one is playing for Dion. I don't know how he's going to be, a freshman of the year. Another one was a quarterback, maybe a true freshman gets on, but, a defensive tackle, he's got a real chance here. You're talking about not crazy if the recruiting credentials hold up. And, they usually do. I'm saying that a little sarcastically, but Will Johnson, we could be talking about being freshman All-American, All-Player of the Year.
Damani Jackson. That was the two of them. Yeah, they were linked.
Forget it. So if once they're in, remember, then.
Well, they were linked for a long time and consistently talked about wanting to go to school together. So, we were hoping we could land both of them. And then towards the end of the process, it was kind of obvious that Damani was just trying to get Will to go somewhere else, and he didn't really have interest in Michigan. So we're happy with how things worked out, right? I try so hard not to get into crazy superlatives with Will because of what he reminds me of. And I don't want to put that out there already, but I mean, the only thing that's going to limit him from being a high impact player this year or freshman of the year, or any of the accolades he could potentially earn, is going to be playing time. So whether that's challenging Jamon Green for the second corner spot, or, getting a role in dime packages, or playing as the third safety, whatever it's going to take, I think Steve Clinkscale is going to try and get him on the field. And yeah, the more he plays, the better. I think the guy's just going to be an absolute star.
I like this selection. This is not one that you're just picking out of the, this isn't nothing against, our picks or picking Donovan Edwards, but Jason is selecting Colston Loveland, the tight end, to come in. He is a true freshman, saying that he has crazy hands. Now, he's got a lot of players, even like Lewis Hansen in front of him, that haven't seen the field. And then, not to mention Eric All and Luke Schoonmaker, but the chances that somebody like Loveland could come in and be a difference maker or click.
Yeah. So where Loveland gets interesting is he's a giant wide receiver, right? He's kind of the modern tight end, the Kyle Pitts prototype almost. So he's a guy that they could potentially sneak out. If you're doing a 3 tight end set with him, Schoonmaker, or Honigford, who's now down to 260, trying to get away from that offensive lineman body back into a tight end body, those 3 are going to all play a ton, obviously. But yeah, if you do something where, they're out there on the line and Loveland's out in the slot, and whether he's in the flat or the seam or whatever, you could get creative with him. Because, yeah, I don't know as a freshman how much impact he will make, but I'm real excited about him as a prospect. He's somebody that we've been hyping up since he came into camp. But yeah, he's behind a few guys, but some of those sophomores that are ahead of him, I wouldn't be shocked if he jumped them and he's, 4th or 5th tight end. But I think more likely than not, his impact's going to be exactly that. There's going to be a game where they can sneak him out and catch a team off guard, and he's going to make a big play.
I'll never forget this on August 5th, you making the comp of Loveland to Kyle Pitts. I'm fine with it. I like comps. I hadn't heard that, but I'm all about it. I'm all about it now. It's pretty easy, Trevor, but you've made my day with that comp. Here's one more question for you from AJ. who is asking if you have any news or perspective on Michigan's new president, and if you think he will help the football program. He's more into athletics than the past presidents. What do you think?
Yeah. First off, I bit my tongue so hard to not compare Will Johnson to Charles Woodson, and then I compare Colston Loveland to Kyle Pitts. So, but here's what I'll say. Santa is, what we know from his past in Cincinnati and from what he's done already in terms of outreach to students and social media. And he's not even in his role yet. He's doing and saying the right things. My optimism is high. He understands that athletics is a big piece of the academics of the school, right? So since Nick Saban has been at Alabama, their enrollment has doubled, right? So a good, strong athletic program can bring students in. I went to Grand Valley State University, which was a small little school in Allendale, Michigan, with a head coach by the name of Brian Kelly. And what he did for that football program, that school has, I couldn't tell you how much larger and what's happened to that campus. And that's because of sports. And I think the new president understands that and that relationship and that balance that needs to exist. I think some people think, oh, the floodgates are going to open and now we're going to do everything with NIL and blah, blah, blah. No, that's not going to happen. NIL, Michigan has everything in motion. I think they have the right plan in place. Regent Acker recently put out an article. Michigan wants to do NIL. They want to do it the right way, and they're going to be a leader, and Santa's going to help propel that. We'll see when he gets in. I like him so far. I'm optimistic. I'm not going to make any bold statements, though. But, yeah, he's saying and doing the right things, and I feel good about the hire.
Well, I'm sure I don't have to tell you, Trevor, but, it's because you're such a big sports fan, and you mentioned Grand Valley State. But if I'm sure somewhere in the basketball arena there is a plaque with my name on it with saying 1987 basketball camp most improved player. I was named there, which was a real shock to me as I sat there. There's hundreds of, but the part that I always remember about that, not that it's just that Grand Valley it speaks a little bit to my athletic career, is it was the biggest trophy that I've ever received. Like, I wasn't expecting any kind of trophy. They gave it to me because this guy was showing me how to shoot free throws one-handed, and I was out there doing it. So they had to pick somebody. It's only a 3 or 4. So they picked me, which was a big surprise. But I went up there, and the trophy was like 2 feet tall. I was like, wow, this is the greatest. I wish I still had that trophy. But I wanted to tell you about Santa. There was a coincidence. I was out in Ann Arbor just last week. They've got this hot new Mexican restaurant. And it is it's a 10 out of 10. You wouldn't think like fancy Mexican restaurant food. You may have been to some of these places, but Ann Arbor has one now. And it's right across from the courthouse, down there on Main Street. And I'm there and I looked down. I was waiting for some seats outside. And I looked down and there was some kind of paper. And it had Santa, Santa, there he was, the new president and everything. And then as I was looking, the first thing that I looked on my phone, I was on Twitter, and there was Santa talking about, Michigan being, teaching Notre Dame how to play football.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked on he's like, hey, Red Berenson was the, greatest hockey coach. And like all the way through, he loves Carol Hutchins already. I mean, he is just, how many ever tweets I saw, I'll say it was 10 about sports. That's 10 more than Mark Schlissel ever put out on Twitter.
Yeah, and that's why I say he's doing and saying the right things, and especially from an engagement standpoint. Look, Michigan is known as an athletic powerhouse. You have to embrace it, and if you're going to lead this university, I would hope that that's a big part of what you do. So, yeah, I love what he's doing on Twitter, and hopefully when he gets in office, it translates to some real positive movement at the university.
I want to see him tweet during the game. What was that?
Right.
What kind of call was that, Harbaugh? All right, so we've got one other thing to do here, and that is to get our pick to click on the defensive side of the ball. And for that selection, let's go to Trevor McCue.
I'm assuming I see what your answer is going to be. That was a name I considered, Mozzie, Morris, Colson, all these guys, like we said. But I'm going R.J. Moten. Going to be the free safety in this defense, 6 foot, 223. Great tackling form, heavy hitter, guy that's going to be able to come up, impact the running game. But I think a lot of people either don't know or forget RJ Moten was a Major League Baseball capable center fielder. He was a part of the draft for baseball that got shortened to the 5 rounds, and his senior season got canceled. So had they had a normal draft, he absolutely would have been taken by a baseball team. He was doing pro workouts. When he first came to Ann Arbor, he wanted to play both sports potentially and has decided to go all in football. So he's going to be playing center field for the Michigan defense. Ooh. And he's an athletic freak. And I think he's going to get, he had 4 pass breakups. I know one of them was actually a dropped interception. 4 pass breakups and the little bit of action that he saw last year. But the biggest play he made last year, biggest indicator of the kind of player I think he's going to be, end of the first half against Ohio State. JSN has a little bit of room on the outside, and he makes a tackle, keeps him in field, forces Ohio State to kick a field goal. Michigan goes up at the end of the half. If Ohio State scores there, who knows what the momentum is of the game. And that was right after the dropped interception. He makes a huge open field tackle. So I think he's exactly the kind of guy we want to have back there as a safety.
I hate JSN.
One
thing about, like Andrell Anthony, RJ Moten passes the look test. Like, you just take a look. If you just line guys up, if you've never seen him play before, you're like, I'll take number 1. Oh, Anthony, yeah, I'll take him. And then, I'll take number 6. Bring him over. He looks like a football player, rangy safety. I think that's a nice selection. And if you know your Michigan football, you do see just the last name of Green. And I picked number 41, Nakai Hill Green. Junior Colson should get talked about a lot. He's the leading returning tackler for this Michigan defense. I think NHG is going to be the leading tackler for the Wolverines. He's my pick to be the leading tackler with the attention that Colson's going to get. I think it'll be 41 there. Those are my picks. On the offense, we agree. On the defense, we both went with another selection. So there it is. NHG, the selection. All right.
I like it a lot. Yep.
Trevor came on. He did a story. It is on Maize and Blue Review right now about Jake Butt. We were comparing the rosters from spring and to the roster of the fall and the weights and the numbers and everything else. Trevor also analyzed that. We just scratched the surface here talking about that. That's a story that is getting quite a bit of play right now on the Den. You want to read that Butt story? You want to look at the rosters? You want to know what Michigan's next move is? You can join the Maize and Blue Review today. Go to michigan.rivals.com. Josh Henschke has a code for you. Right up until the opener, you can get premium content for free. Use that code UofMFree22 at checkout. So that's what's going on there. What do you got in store for this weekend, Trevor? What are you going to do?
I have no idea. Sorry. No, probably it's like the last weekend before things get very busy for me with football and very busy for my wife with her venture. So I think this is I live in Grand Haven, which is home of home of the Coast Guard Festival, which is going on right now, which means we're going to be hiding in our house because we can't travel anywhere in our neighborhood. So probably going to be a very chill weekend just because it's probably our last one for the next 4 months. So
get out to the water. It's going to be hot as blazes this weekend.
It's impossible to get out. There's no parking here, man.
That sounds like you just get a backpack with some water and make the move. How far are you from the water?
A couple miles. We'd have to drive there. Yeah. So.
Okay.
Yeah. Maybe we'll find a way to get some ice cream or something, but we'll see.
Okay. Well, enjoy it. We certainly enjoyed your time, your perspective. Love the Jake Butt story, and I'm looking forward to talking with you before the football season and then obviously during the football season. So have a great weekend and enjoy it because it won't be long now.
You too, buddy. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks. There he is, Trevor McCue. We'll be back